This is Anarchast.
Hey individuals, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have John Bush coming in from Austin, Texas. He's part of a new show called Sovereign Living, and I think it's really exciting and interesting. It's basically a reality show on being a sovereign individual. And but before we get into all of that, John, we always like to ask everybody, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, I had a long journey from government skeptic. I guess back in 2002, I caught a documentary and began to question what really took place on 9/11, and from there began investigating the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and Ron Paul's first election came around, well, not his first one, but his presidential run in 2008, got turned on to libertarianism, and from Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard, and the consistency was very appealing to me, and from there I was introduced to agorism, and it's been a, no looking back. It's been a fun journey, and now we're trying to create the anarchist society, the stateless society that I've learned about for so many years. That's
great, and you're doing that just outside of Austin, Texas?
Yeah, we live just outside of the city limits here in Travis County, Texas, in central Texas.
And how long have you been there and doing this sort of lifestyle you've been doing?
I've been here for about 2.5 years, and I guess for the past 3 to 4 years, really, my fiance Catherine and I have been trying to live our life in as most consistent manner as possible, consistent with the philosophy of liberty, and it's been quite the exciting journey. And more recently, in the past few years, we've gotten into farming and growing our own food and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, that's great. I watched the first episode, which is still private on the internet, Sovereign Living, and I think you're trying to do an entire series of showing people how you're living. Is that correct?
That's right. We're in the process of putting together a 12-episode series that follows Catherine and I and our 2 children in our quest to become self-sufficient and lead a voluntary and natural life. And we've filmed the first 3, which cover the topics of self-sufficiency, finding stateless solutions to deal with your neighbors or any problems we have amongst community members. And the 3rd episode covers our natural home birth of our 2nd child, William Lysander. And there's a bunch of other topics, from alternative currencies to alternative education to community defense, that we'll be covering in the future episodes.
Lysander, I like that.
Yeah.
Is your first child middle name Rothbard or anything like that?
No, her name is Aliana Elizabeth.
Okay, after the Queen, sort of, they went different ways. You went with the
No.
Just joking. I wouldn't denigrate your daughter by saying she has anything to do with the Queen of England, that hag.
She does have a royal attitude sometimes.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I've got a daughter as well. So I've been watching this, and we're going to, hopefully, if you allow us, play a few clips as we're doing this episode of what you've been doing out there. I think it's really exciting, and basically tell people what you've been doing as far as growing your own food and becoming as self-sufficient as possible.
Wow, so this is it. Now obviously the solar brings in the energy. Why would you need to have all these batteries?
Sun doesn't always shine. So we'd still like to have power when the sun's not shining, and that's basically what the battery bank does, is give you that power when you don't have an outside power input.
Every second, the sun releases roughly 500,000 times the energy needs of the whole planet. This makes for a whole lot of energy just waiting to be harnessed. Once the solar panels capture the sun's energy, it needs to be stored in a battery bank for nighttime and cloudy days. A charge controller ensures that the batteries won't be damaged by overcharging or over-depleting. In order to power your house, the energy from the batteries needs to be inverted from a direct current to an alternating current with an inverter. Connect the inverter to the AC fuse box in your home, and voila, the energy of the sun is now powering your house.
We wouldn't have been able to afford this thing if we got these new, but data centers can't afford any failure, so they cycle through their batteries way before they're bad, and we picked them off of there.
Do you think it's already paid for itself?
Probably in about 4 months it'll have paid for itself.
Sometimes you supplement the solar with the generator. You want to check that out?
Yep, I'll show you.
So this is it.
Our military surplus generator.
Excellent. So tell me, you guys got the solar, you got the battery. Why do you need the generator on top of that?
Well, I guess it's twofold. One, if you're having bad weather for a long period of time and you're just not getting the sun, you need the generator for that. The other is if there is any issue with our solar panels, we have to take them apart to fix them or something along those lines. Again, we can power the house.
So we're layered up. We got our winter gear on. We got the jeans with the long johns underneath. I think they might be Catherine's long johns. They're a little snug around the... After the morning meeting, Adam needed a hand moving pigs who outgrew their pen.
You're gonna want to take that mic off, and I got a little something you can wear, because you're gonna get nice and muddy doing this.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I said earlier, 99% of the time, it's not mud.
This is what I looked like yesterday afternoon after I was done, you know, wrangling piglets.
All right, here we go.
All right, so what's our goal here?
We're gonna pick them up and we're just gonna set them over that fence.
The pigs definitely knew what was up. They tried to hide in their little igloo house. I saw Adam try to sneak into the igloo house. And then I remembered he just got through telling me the last thing you want to do is go into the igloo house, because it's a sure way to get injured.
But he's crazy enough to do it anyway.
How about that little guy?
A little chubby. You one in the middle?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Score one for the humans.
Yeah.
This is exciting. That was a workout.
Yeah.
Too soon for a beer?
That's never too soon.
Not only was it quite the workout, I see how you get injured too, but now we have the lovely scent of pig poop. That's kind of lingering. I see we got some on the camera there too.
It's definitely a whole lot easier when you have two people in there to wrestle them.
This is definitely a team sport, this farming and self-sufficiency stuff.
Oh, definitely.
It really shows you how important it is to have community and support and help. We have a 2.4 acre farmstead here in southeast Travis County, and we got about 10 large beds in our kitchen garden. We just built a hugelkultur garden, which is a way to grow food where you put wood logs underneath the garden beds. It helps retain moisture, and it helps provide nutrients to the plants. There's about 17 of those beds. And then we have a little over 100 chickens, which really provide a good chunk of our diet. Our goal this year is to become 50% food self-sufficient, where we get 50% of our food from our property or through trade with local farms. And so far we're about 7 to 10% of the way there, and a lot of it comes from the eggs that we get and the meat that we get from the chickens. But our goal is to continue to build some aquaponic systems, to raise 200 chickens, to build out some more gardens, including putting a community garden in our front yard for the surrounding area. And we're cruising quite along, and the reality show documents our journey from zero food self-sufficiency up to half of the food that we get.
That's great. We're actually doing basically the same thing down in Chile at Gulf Scouts Chile. We're trying to become totally self-sufficient. So maybe we can have you down there and you can help us out with some of the planning. We already have actually quite a few great people. We're working on composting and awesome. Solar-powered hot water heaters, and we have a lot of water there already. So yeah, we're doing all the same things down there. So that's fantastic, and really excited to see more of these episodes. Have you sold the episode to anyone, or what's the plan with that?
Well, the first 3 episodes we financed with some money through the Center for Natural Living. It's a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The mission is to demonstrate the value of voluntary cooperation and natural living in the areas of sustainability, family, and health by creating educational media and helping families to fulfill their basic needs. And we have the first 3 episodes pretty much fully recorded. They're pretty much 99.9% done, and we've began filming the next 4 episodes. And in order to finance the filming of the next 9 to complete the 12-episode series, we've launched our own sovereign Kickstarter-style program whereby people get rewards in exchange for donations. That can all be found at sovereignliving.tv. We're hoping to self-distribute it through sovereignliving.tv, perhaps turn that into a subscription-based television channel. We have some conversations going with some mainstream networks, as well as some folks that are working on building some libertarian-based online multimedia channels. But we really want to make sure that, above all, we can maintain creative control. And unfortunately, with a lot of the mainstream channels, especially in the reality TV realm, the first series of some shows, they don't allow control, and they shift, and they're the ones that dictate how the characters are portrayed. So we want to stick true to the sovereign manner and release it on our own, but we're exploring a lot of different options at this point.
Yeah, they'll probably want you to have Honey Boo Boo live with you for a while or something.
Or start beating our kids or something.
Yeah, do something.
More drama.
That's interesting because, interestingly, I've just been approached by Morgan Spurlock, who did the Super Size Me. I don't know if you remember that documentary.
Yeah, right on. That's a good one.
And he's doing, or looking at doing, an actual series on anarchists and anarchist enclaves and how people are living an anarchic lifestyle.
That's great.
So I don't know if you knew about that.
No, I'm not familiar, but I think that would be a wonderful subject to cover. And there's a lot of people in the mainstream that are coming around to these ideas that we ought to just leave each other alone, or if people want to live a certain way over here, as long as they don't interfere with us. But no, that'd be great to participate in that program, and y'all's project obviously would be something to highlight.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely hook you up with them. They just approached me a few weeks ago, and they asked me, I guess I'm a fairly well-known anarchist, and they're asking me who are all the other great anarchists, so I'll definitely pass you along to them. You'd make perfect sense for exactly what they're looking for. So maybe we can do it that way. So you see, Anarchast episodes are not just for fun. We're also trying to connect and make some money and connect and do some business. Yeah, for sure. One of the things that interests me a lot is children and raising them in a very free and peaceful environment. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of that here. I live in, for the most part, Acapulco, Mexico, which is a very free place. And I plan to live half the year probably in Chile as Chile gets rolling. Mm-hmm. And I've met many anarchists, and they're raising their kids very peacefully. And I saw in your first episode, you read them some cartoon book, which I'd like to get my hands on. What was the name of that book?
It's called A Children's Guide to Anarchy.
Yeah, that's
a rule is to break, A Child's Guide to Anarchy. It's a good one.
Yeah, it sounds great. We also had another person on another Anarchast episode, and we'll link to it, who has his own children's book about anarchy. And yeah, that's great. So how are your kids enjoying this experience?
Well, we have a almost 2-year-old, Aliana, and our other child is about 4 months old now. But we've already had plenty of opportunity to apply the philosophy of nonviolent parenting, and I feel our kids are great. They're brilliant. They're happy. They feel open. They're able to connect with us emotionally. We like to practice partnership parenting, where we're creating a balance of each other's needs. It's not a hierarchical relationship. We're not in a position of authority, although we do maintain a safe environment. And if the kid's running out towards the street or getting into something that they ought not to be doing, we intervene, but we don't use rewards and punishments. We don't use corporal punishment, obviously, and everything's gone really well so far. We're really proud of our two kiddos, and I'm excited of sharing the philosophy of nonviolent parenting with others, because I think it's definitely a way to create a more free society. If we can't expect there to be freedom and people to appreciate freedom if they are raised in a system of coercion with their parents. It's obvious that they'll just shift over to being coerced by the state and not questioning it or standing up to it if their parents train them their entire lives. So we're trying to strike that root and encourage people to have loving, happy partnership relationships with their children.
Absolutely, and you brought up a funny point. My daughter the other day, she's 6 years old, and she was on this about an 8-foot wall, and she said, "Papa, I'm going to jump." And I didn't yell at her or hit her or tell her to stop. I said, well, I wouldn't do that if I was you. Mm-hmm. I suggest you're going to hurt yourself if you jump. And she said, really? And I said, you can try. You can do whatever you want. And it actually would hurt me to see her hurt herself, but I will not, if it's not a life and death situation, I won't use any sort of physical force to stop her to do it. Mm-hmm. And through doing that, your kids learn this amazing trust of you. Mm-hmm. You become their advisor, not their authoritarian figure. And so oftentimes My kids will just come up and ask me questions, and they're very curious, and they have no fear. And the other day, my son broke something, and he came in and he said, "Papa, sit down. I have to tell you something." And I'm like, "What happened?" "We dropped the iPad in the pool." And I went, "Well, that's too bad. Now you don't have an iPad." And he's like, "Yep." You know, like there's no yelling, no, well, don't do that. They learned, now they don't have an iPad, and they know not to ask for another one. I might, you know, down the road get another one out of the goodness of my heart or whatever. But, you know, if I gave them something and they broke it, well, now they just don't have it anymore, and that they learned a lesson. And yeah, it's a great way to do it, and I totally agree that it's a really important thing for the future if we can get more people treating children this way, because they really don't understand. They go out into the world. My son laughs when he sees policemen. He's like, "Who's that man in the funny costume?" And he just doesn't understand. They haven't been trained to obey and to submit or to be disciplined. I was just at a conference last week talking about peaceful parenting, and someone asked me the question. They said, "How do you deal with discipline?" And I had actually stood there for a few seconds, and I'm like, "Discipline? What does that even mean?" And I looked it up later, but I basically had the general idea. It means to obey authority. And so my general answer was, I don't even know what that word means, obey authority. Why would I want my kids to want to obey authority? They should want to have voluntary transactions, and they should want to have a good relationship with people around them, and that happens through voluntary transactions and not initiating force against others. But to discipline a child is a concept I just don't even understand.
Yeah, I'm often asked by people, if you're not spanking or using corporal punishment or rewards and punishments, you know, how do you deal with disobedience? And there's this great quote that disobedience is not a problem if obedience is not the goal, which I really try to adhere to. And I think a lot of parents, you know, they just try to get their children to be molded to fit their needs, for convenience, for keeping up with the Joneses, for not being embarrassed if there's an outburst. And I think it's important for parents of all walks of life to take a deep breath and to realize that they have a wonderful opportunity to raise a new being and to bring a new being into this planet, into this world. And it's a great responsibility, and maybe they should equalize the needs between the two rather than acting as an authority figure over the young child.
Yeah, totally agree. One other thing I heard about you have 6 steps to finding freedom. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're trying to find 100% total freedom within our lifetimes, and I don't think it's too much to ask for. That's an environment that's 100% free of legitimized hierarchical coercion, where peaceful, mutually beneficial voluntary associations are the order of the day. And there's 6 steps that I'm taking and my family's taking, we're going towards in our personal life, and there's many people that are going along with us here in Central Texas and all sorts of other places like the New Hampshire's Free State Project or the Gulch Project you guys got going down there in Chile. And essentially the 6 steps, they don't necessarily have to be done in chronological order, but the first of which is to geographically concentrate with individuals of a like mind. And of course that's because there's strength in numbers. We'll be able to create alternative institutions and economies amongst ourselves, and as we engage in future steps we'll be able to look out for one another and provide safety and security. The second step is to get your house in order. That's to learn to grow your own food, try to become more self-sufficient, to practice peaceful parenting, to have loving, harmonious relationships with your significant others, with your families, to get out of debt if you're in debt and deep in debt, get your house clean, literally get your house in order, live more practical, get rid of stuff that's unnecessary. The third step is to delegitimize the state in the minds of the masses, and that will help to serve. If we're ever rounded up or the state tries to crack down on resistance movements or anarchist movements, as has happened in history, all throughout history, if we've worked hard to delegitimize the state in the minds of the masses, then we'll have the masses on our side should the inevitable crackdown occur. There's massive marginalization campaigns on so-called sovereign citizens, anarchists, even libertarians, people that support Ron Paul. A lot of this is coming from the Department of Homeland Security, the Southern Poverty Law Center. So if we work to undermine those ideas and to undermine the legitimacy of people that have badges or public titles next to their names, if we undermine the idea that they have the right to force people to do things against their will, and if people resist, then it's the person resisting that needs to be thrown in jail or needs to be dealt with. I think if we undermine that idea, it'll help us immensely to create a more free society. That's step 3. Step 4 would be to build alternative institutions. Whether it's an alternative institution like using Bitcoin or bartering or trading with silver, economic alternative institutions, whether it's growing your own food and trading amongst one another, food production in an alternative institution, not relying obviously on the government or even grocery stores and big corporate chains. People can have their own voluntary healthcare cooperatives, focusing on natural healthcare, sharing herbs and supplements and vitamins with one another. Alternative institutions of communication, our own parallel internet networks that run through wireless routers per se, up to alternative institutions of justice where we seek our own arbitration and we don't rely on centralized monopoly court systems, and even one of the most controversial alternative institutions of defense, whether it's a community watch group, whether it's a group of guys that arms themselves, learns how to shoot and commits to a mutual defense compact, or whether it's a full-blown militia-like institution or a private defense agency, whatever it is. I think it's important that we create these alternatives not only to demonstrate to the masses that there's a better way to organize society that doesn't rely on coercion, that relies on mutually beneficial voluntary associations, but also to build the free world that we all desire right now. Step 5 is to engage in hardcore philanthropy, to dispel the myth that libertarians and anarchists are only looking out for their own self-interest, and more importantly, to create a better world and to prove that freedom works. Get out there, help low-income families, help folks that are underserved, help folks that are struggling to make ends meet. And not only will this serve to create a better world and help folks out and give credence to the philosophy of freedom, that the idea that voluntary cooperation is always better than coercion. We ought to use community, not coercion. But it'll also act as an insurance. As I said before, the delegitimization of the state in the minds of the masses. If we're out there engaging in hardcore philanthropy, if the state tries to put their boot to our necks, it'll only serve to take credibility away from the government, because I imagine the old lady that, oh my God, I can't believe they hauled that guy off. He always works at the bread line down the street that's been helping the food bank, that's been helping get food for us, and they've been helping clean up the streets down the road and helping with the environment. Engaging in philanthropy will serve as a protection for us as we engage in the final step, which is to opt out in mass. So it's my opinion that we ought to geographically concentrate, get our house in order. We ought to build these alternative institutions, engage in the philanthropy, and once we're all together, we ought to opt out in a massive way. People can go ahead and opt out individually and do their own thing, but I think there'll be even more strength in numbers when we all stand united. And that's why the 6th step is to opt out in mass. So it's just a little way that I demonstrate. A lot of people say, oh, the anarcho-capitalists and the voluntarists, they don't have a path towards freedom. It's just pie in the sky ideas that they're discussing, a philosophy they're discussing. But I think this is a real practical step where we can put one foot in front of the other, and before we know it, if enough of us engage in these activities, we'll create the free society that we all desire.
I think that's a great checklist, and you mentioned building alternative institutions. Of course, in Detroit, it's sort of falling apart right now. The state is again falling apart, as it always does, and people have started to do their own private policing. There's private buses now, and you mentioned other things. There's Judge.me, so you can have private arbitration systems, which was started by Anarcho-capitalists. If anyone knows him, please let me know. I'd like to have him on the show. There's a lot of things moving in our favor. The state is collapsing, and because of that, there's going to be opportunities, and I think you've made some great mentions of how we can also protect ourselves from those people who still believe in the state and endear ourselves to them so they don't kill us as they all eat each other in the total collapse. I'm actually running out of time. I stupidly bought a camera that's from Europe, and they have a regulation. You can't have more than 20 minutes of video at a time, or else you have to pay some extra tax. So once again, the government is fucking with me. But why don't you go ahead good. And oh, by the way, also while you were talking, I messaged Morgan Spurlock's people, and they've actually been trying to get a hold of you. So there you go. So they've already emailed you, and hopefully
great.
you get on his program.
Right
so
on.
A lot of good things happened here in the last little while. So great to have you on. And why don't you once again just mention where people can crowd raise for your documentary or your reality show?
Yeah, the show, Sovereign Living, the 12-episode reality show. Like I said, we already have episodes 1 through 3 complete, and we're currently raising funds to produce the next 9 episodes. We're going to be screening the first 3 episodes at Libertopia coming up in California, so if people are going to that, they'll have an opportunity to check it out. There's a sizzle reel sneak peek at sovereignliving.tv, and that's also where you can find the crowdsource campaign that we put on our own. It's not Kickstarter, Indiegogo, it's our own campaign where people can donate, and in exchange for their donation, they'll get some really cool rewards. We're also looking for people to sponsor the show and have 30-second or 1-minute announcements. That's at sovereignliving.tv.
That's great, and I'll be at Libertopia too, and I especially like Libertopia because it's so close to Mexico, so if things get really bad, I can at least swim back here. And that's at the end of August, and I really recommend if you're into this kind of stuff, you can meet all kinds of great people like John Bush, and I'd like to thank John Bush for being on. John Bush of Sovereign Living, and check out his stuff, and maybe you'll see it on TV soon. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.